All right, let's get right into it. We're going to be talking about Ray Dalio, the guy who founded Bridgewater Associates, literally the biggest hedge fund in the world. But here's the thing. This isn't really about investing. It's about his principles. Think of it as a playbook for dealing with reality, one that he forged in the fire of his own massive failures. It's a guide for making better decisions, not just at work, but in your life.
So Dalio kicks things off with this really powerful metaphor. He says that time is like a river, and it's constantly pushing us forward right into these encounters with reality, where we have to make a choice. You can't stop the river, and you definitely can't dodge those encounters. And that, of course, leads to the billion-dollar question. If we're all just floating down this river, heading for these unavoidable moments, how do we make sure we don't just crash and burn? How do we make the kinds of decisions that lead to success, not total disaster? This is the exact problem his entire system is designed to solve.
And this is the core of his whole philosophy, the evolutionary loop. It goes like this. You set a huge, audacious goal. You go for it. And very often, you fail. But, and this is the key, that failure isn't the end of the story. It's actually the beginning. You take that painful experience, you learn from it, you create a new principle, and then you improve. And that improvement lets you aim for an even bigger goal. It's just this constant upward cycle of evolution.
Now, to really get this loop, we have to talk about what Dalio calls his abyss. This wasn't some abstract idea for him. No, this was a real, career-defining, catastrophic failure that completely reshaped how he saw the world.
So picture this. It's the early 1980s, and Ray Dalio is basically on top of the world. He started Bridgewater out of his apartment and turned it into a massive success, advising huge clients like McDonald's. He was so confident, so sure he was right, that he went on TV and publicly predicted a massive economic depression was right around the corner. He bet everything on it.
Well, that depression never happened. In fact, just the opposite did. The stock market took off on one of the biggest bull runs in history. And Dalio, he wasn't just a little bit wrong. He was spectacularly, completely, and painfully wrong. His bet just blew up and he lost almost everything.
And this wasn't just a financial hit. This was deeply personal. He had to fire the people who trusted him, people he thought of as his family. The pain of it all was so intense that it forced him to question everything he thought he knew about making decisions.
But you know, that abyss gave him something incredibly valuable. Humility. He realized that just being smart and confident wasn't nearly enough. He needed a system to protect himself from his own worst enemy, his own ego and certainty. This is where he developed what he calls a healthy fear of being wrong.
So, from the wreckage of that failure, Dalio didn't just decide to try again. He started to build a totally new machine for making decisions, one that was engineered from the ground up to find the truth, no matter how uncomfortable that truth might be.
He figured out that there are two massive barriers that get in the way of good decision-making for all of us. First, there is our ego, which absolutely hates being wrong. And second, there are our blind spots. You know, the areas where our own way of thinking just prevents us from seeing the full picture. His principles are designed specifically to overcome these two things.
So, tool number one in fighting these barriers is something he calls radical transparency. At his company, Bridgewater, almost every single meeting is recorded and is available for anyone in the company to go back and watch. The goal here is simple. Make sure problems and disagreements have absolutely nowhere to hide. You can't just sweep things under the rug when they're on tape for everybody to see.
And this kind of transparency is what makes his next even more powerful idea possible. An idea meritocracy. In this system, it doesn't matter what the boss thinks. It doesn't matter what the majority of people think. What matters is creating an environment where the best ideas win. Even if that idea comes from a junior employee who is challenging the CEO, the goal is truth, not hierarchy.
Just think for a second about how radically different that is, right? In an autocracy, one person decides. In a democracy, the majority rules. But in an idea meritocracy, the power isn't with a person or a group. It's with the logic and the evidence behind the idea itself. It's a total flip in where authority comes from.
Okay, so you might be thinking, doesn't this just create total chaos if everyone is disagreeing all the time? And that's where this next rule comes in, and it's crucial. Believability weighting. The idea is that you don't treat all opinions equally. Instead, you give more weight, more believability to the opinions of people who have a proven track record of being right in that specific domain. It's like you wouldn't ask a poet for brain surgery advice, right? Same principle.
So,
With these principles as his blueprint, Dalio set out to build Bridgewater not just as another company, but as a machine, an organization literally engineered to find and act on the truth.
And he breaks it down very simply. He says the machine has two main parts: the people you hire and the culture you create. You absolutely need the right people, and they need to be operating within the right kind of culture to produce great results.
And their approach is incredibly systematic. I mean, to make sure mistakes are learned from, they use an issue log, where every single problem is documented and tracked. To understand how people are wired, they use personality tests like Myers-Briggs. It's all about creating tools that make objective data about people's strengths and weaknesses available to everyone.
One of the most famous tools they use is the baseball card. Seriously, every employee gets one, and it lists out their strengths and weaknesses, kind of like stats on the back of a real baseball card. Now, this isn't for judging people. It's all about effectiveness. It helps make sure you don't give a super detail-oriented task to a big-picture thinker who's, not great with the small stuff. You put people in a position to win.
And this data-driven way of thinking extends to technology too. For Dalio, it's not about humans versus computers. It's about the partnership. The human brain is incredible at things like creativity and imagination. Computers are incredible at raw speed and calculation. He argues that when you combine them, you create the most powerful decision-making system you possibly can.
Okay, so let's pull the camera way, way back now. Because for Dalio, these principles aren't just for running a successful company. He believes they actually reflect a fundamental law of nature itself.
And this is maybe the single biggest takeaway: evolve or die. He says this evolutionary cycle isn't just for us or for companies. It applies to countries, to economies, to literally everything. You are either adapting and getting better, or you're declining and on your way out. There's no such thing as standing still.
He even maps this evolutionary idea onto the arc of a human life, breaking it into three main phases. In phase 1, we're dependent on others, and our job is to learn. In phase 2, others start to depend on us, and our job is to work. And finally, in phase 3, our role shifts to passing on the wisdom and the principles we've gained along the way.
And this all leads to what I think is his most profound idea. We think we're chasing things like money or status or success, but Dalio says those are just the bait. The real prize isn't the thing you get at the end of the journey. The real reward is the struggle and the person you become through that struggle. The real reward is your own evolution.
So after exploring this incredibly detailed system that Dalio built, the final question really just turns right back to you. He built his principles out of his own painful encounters with reality. So what are the principles that guide your decisions, and how are you capturing them to help you navigate your own river?